Hi, this is Paul. A couple days ago, the YouTube algorithm served me up this video of Mohammed Hijab, who had a conversation with Jordan Peterson and Jonathan Peugeot, and Andrew Tate, who I knew next to nothing about, except for all of the drama going on around him. So I thought, oh, well, this is interesting.
I wanted to ask you now, because this is the hot topic, especially in the Muslim community, about your conversion.
Yeah.
So tell us the story, like what happened exactly.
Well, I think a lot of people who've been following me for a while understand that I've been very respectful of Islam for a long time.
Yeah, sure.
I was born in a Christian country. I was raised as a Christian, and I've always been very respectful of Islam. And it's become more and more obvious to me and more pertinent that Islam is the last religion on the planet. When I talk about Islam, because I'm new to it,
Yeah.
I
think that the Mormons and a good many other religions would disagree, but go on.
I'm a little bit careful, right? Because I'm new to it. I'm certainly not a scholar. There's so much I need to learn. I know I'm on a learning journey. I'm not here to sit here and talk scripture. I don't know those things yet. I'm here to learn.
Yeah.
But
And we're here at your assistance.
You're gonna have to learn a little Arabic, I think.
thank you, bro. Thank you.
Honestly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But it's just, for me, it feels like the last religion on earth. I feel like there's no other religion. People say to me, why did you convert? And I said, I don't really feel it as a conversion. It's almost like I knew God was real, and now I've become religious. And they say, well, you were religious before. I was like, religious before how? Christian? What does Christian mean? Like, who's not a Christian? You go to Christian nations, and everyone says they're a Christian. Look how they live their lives. Go into the average church. Is anyone actually fearful of God?
I wonder what he's gonna say after he goes into an Islamic nation. And anyway, we'll continue.
Anybody. No, the girls are out on Saturday night drinking, and then they turn up to church because their parents made them. Like, there's no substance to the religion.
He's going to a country where the girls turn up in church?
And also, Islam very closely reflects my personal beliefs. Through my personal life, I've learned that if you don't have standards and you're not a strong person who's prepared to defend his ideas, you'll be crushed.
Yes.
And we look at most religions in the world today which are not prepared to defend their ideas. What's happened to them? They're just getting crushed. And now we have Christianity as an idea which has basically said, well, we can't set any firm rules because everyone will just quit. So instead, let's make it so easy to be a Christian that nobody has to put any effort in.
Yeah.
And then accept everybody no matter what, and hopefully we can keep the church doors open. That's not God to me, you know?
Yeah.
God to me is strong. God to me is something to be feared.
Yeah.
God to me is someone that people are afraid to mock.
Yeah.
God to me is someone that you have to go out of your way to prove something to. God to me has red lines.
Yeah.
Like, God to me represents the Islamic faith. The Christian God to me, I don't see God. I can't.
Now, this straight talk, hard line, traditionalism. Yeah, there's a lot of appetite for this, and there's a lot of appetite for this within Christianity and within the intramural Christian conversations as well.
I don't see anything there. So
Yeah.
to me, it was the only logical choice in the end.
Alhamdulillah, man. I mean, as you're saying this, I'm sure many people are like ecstatic and extremely happy. It's a great thing.
That's the sort of intertribal warfare. Ooh, we've got Andrew Tate.
For everyone, honestly, because, just anyone coming into Islam is the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us better than the world and everything in it.
Yeah.
But imagine now somebody of major influence. I mean, you're the most Googled person on the planet. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if you still have
Yeah,
the top spot.
I think Putin might have beat me as of last week, but I think it's between me and Putin at the moment. But I don't want to lose to Putin. Look, Putin's the big G. I don't want more enemies. Like, it's fine, Vladimir. You can have it.
I never thought I'd hear you saying that statement.
Yeah.
Putin beat me last year. Right?
Yeah. I think we're certainly the most Googled.
But no, it's definitely something beautiful, and a lot of people have. You'll be surprised at how many women as well. Like, because obviously the accusations of misogyny and stuff, which but a lot of women, alhamdulillah, especially in the Muslim world, they're absolutely happy. In fact, let me tell you a story. Just before I came here today, one particular woman, I can't reveal her identity, but she's working as a school teacher.
Yep.
In London, and
so I found this quite interesting. Well, I should let. I'm not particularly interested in this story, but
actually in the schools they did, or I can't Islam and so on, and unfortunately they fired her from the position.
Wow.
So you can see that this is the level of encroachment we're talking about here. So and this shows you that the level of fraternity that exists, and not only the fact that when you're looking at
part of the same the same psychology that really attracts young men in neighborhoods like I've lived in all my life to join gangs. This is a very similar psychology that encourages people to, I'm not pointing out Islam here, but to sort of, hey, get with your tribe and get strong with your tribe and get hard lines and so on and so forth.
Twitter or whatever social media, it's not a representation of what's really happening on the ground.
Of course. And I mean, that's crazy to hear. And what's most crazy is, yeah, the fervor behind this idea that I'm somehow extremist is truly clown world. Like I've sat as a professional and
now did Peugeot just use this clown world thing? Was that a broader meme, or has this guy been also listening to Peugeot?
Analyzed my content and understood which things can be taken out of context and which things were said in a way perhaps they shouldn't have been said before I was massively famous. But we have to sit here and understand that if you take anybody on the planet and give them 7 years of YouTube and then they decide and they blow up big, you're going to be able to find 30 to 45 seconds of clip across all those years that can be taken out of context, right? Yeah. And it's truly crazy because they sit and say, oh yeah, but the young boys are watching your stuff and they don't truly understand all of it, and there's nuance that's missing. And my argument is very simple. My argument is, well, one, you're taking small clips out of context. And two, there's not a single piece of content on the internet that a 14-year-old boy can't misunderstand. Name someone who's producing content on the internet that you would be 100% happy for a 14-year-old to...
drill artists, and so they're saying, I live in an area I'm not going to mention the names of the artists, but they're talking about going to this person's house and killing him.
And killing him in the middle of a knife crime epidemic. Yeah. We have Lil Nas twerking on having sex with the devil in his music videos. Really? Like, we're going to sit here and talk about how children can be impressionable young children, and I'm sitting there saying there's no way I'm the worst person on the internet. That's not why they deleted me.
The difference for them is, as you've mentioned, on those...
Now, I'm not sure if this is the video that I saw before, because there was a clip in here that didn't come, and maybe I'm going to have to find it a little bit later. Now, because I had heard the guy's name and I didn't know anything about him, and apparently he's been canceled from just about every major social media platform, I thought, well, I got to figure out who this Andrew Tate guy is. And so
pagan almost.
I found this video from Michael Knowles, and where Michael Knowles basically had the same question, and so he's got staff, and so the staff selected for him a variety of clips, and so he sort of did what Andrew Tate complained about, and then there was one clip after another.
Into the eye of a hurricane, there was a 50% chance of it crashing. I'd want a male pilot. I think that males are better under stress and under pressure.
And so he talked about there's a lot of issues you can bring up in this, and then Michael Knowles sort of gives his impression, and then another little clip.
Travel, just pursue anything that makes me happy. Try to make money. I love traveling, so I would probably just
drink cocktails on the beach. Okay, next.
About the same thing, like travel, focus on my career.
A life without children is vapious, and it's inane, and it's pointless. And you may sit here and think that your career matters, but the truth is that your job will fire you at a whim and not give a second, don't give a solitary. And when you're 52 and you're past it with no grandchildren, in a house by yourself, and all your friends have grandchildren in this beautiful life, and you're sitting there by yourself, do you think the fact that you can afford a few extra Gucci bags is going to genuinely make you feel happy? I was at my grandmother's 93rd birthday. I stood there and I looked at my 93-year-old grandmother, and there was a whole room full with maybe 70 people that came from that one woman. Isn't that remarkable? Yeah. That nobody cared about her career. Nobody asked what job she did. Nobody asked how many times she went to the club. Nobody asked if she had time to go to festivals. No, you had 70 sentient beings, including myself, full of life from one woman who dedicated herself to being a mother and a good wife. That is beautiful. And if you sit here and genuinely think...
And so Michael Knowles, basically does something similar to what I often do, but he dresses better for it. And it was also interesting because Michael Knowles, although... is he Roman Catholic? I mean, I'm not terribly well versed with the DW crowd, but he's the Christian on he's one of the Christians on the bunch. Of course, Andrew Klavan I know a little bit better. I've listened to more of his stuff. And again, every time I mention Andrew Klavan, I always love that I really enjoyed his spiritual memoir. It's a really beautiful book. And he's written another one recently that a lot of people said I should look at, and I probably should because he's a good writer. But Andrew Klavan is Anglican, I believe, and but Michael Knowles, and so it was interesting because Michael Knowles would just sort of say what he agrees with and say what he disagrees with, and then they got into the question of misogyny and Andrew Tate, and some other clips from other interviews that he's done, and sort of give an overall assessment, and again it was a lot of stuff not terribly surprising from the YouTube manosphere. And so then Andrew Tate was on Piers Morgan, and so when I did that, I also began to note that, of course, the algorithm does what it does, and so suddenly Andrew Tate is just all over my YouTube feed. And yesterday, those of you who caught the Freddie and Paul show know that I went out to lunch with Freddie, and I had a couple of videos. Freddie's been wanting to dance on the Freddie and Paul show lately, so and I think it's, I listened to the Rafe Kelly John Vervaeke conversation, which I thought was really quite good, and a lot of what Rafe was saying really impressed me in terms of need for movement and all. And, Freddie takes zero care of himself. He doesn't watch his diet. He doesn't, Freddie is going to turn 50 this January. But when Freddie starts moving, it's like, you go, Freddie. Some people say, well, when are you going to dance with him? It's like, you don't want to see that. Freddie's, so Freddie and Charles J having a good time doing some dance. But so then I made a short because I hadn't made any shorts, and I was talking to someone who's a lot bigger YouTube than I am, not at all connected. He does tech YouTubes, and I know him in a way completely disconnected. He's probably never seen a single one of my videos, and may never see any of my videos. But I talked to him about shorts because he had been playing around with shorts a little bit, YouTube shorts, and I really, when I had looked at it, I really didn't like it because it was just sort of TikTok, and TikTok sort of I don't really like. Maybe that's because I'm old. But he said, well, I use shorts to comment, to respond to comments in the comment section. I thought, that's actually, there's often comments that I see that I'd like to respond to, and I can type in a little response to the comments underneath, but sometimes I like bringing the comments up into the channel, and actually shorts might be a good way to do it, might be a good way to sort of discipline myself in terms of time frame. So, but then Andrew Tate is on these shorts, and I thought about the fact that in one way he's exiled from YouTube, and the same is true of Alex Jones. They get exiled from these platforms, but then they live on in the algorithm. And, the same thing happened to Jordan Peterson on Twitter. Jordan Peterson, was suspended from Twitter unless he recants. It was very interesting when Scott Adams said, yeah, when Twitter, complains about a tweet, just delete it and go on to the next. It's like Scott Adams and Jordan Peterson, very different approaches to life. And but yet the algorithm still feeds off these characters and promotes their videos in other channels, and on we go. Okay, so the other one was a clip, and this is the full one because I noticed that Mohammed Hijab wasn't saying what I expected him to say, which is the reason that I started this video. So let's start from the beginning again. Focus. Word to all of you wanting to play around with YouTube: get a Sony camera or a Canon camera. When I started out, I had this Fuji. It wasn't a Fuji. It was a Lumix. It was Panasonic Lumix. Not great focusing, and they're not in focus. All this production value, those good mics, focus.
We are in the presence of a cultural icon, a physical specimen, a controversialist, a master orator, a champ. And we've also got Andrew Tate.
That was smooth. I like that. I was sitting there thinking, I'll take this introduction. I'll take this. But thank you.
How you doing, man?
I'm good, G. You?
You're good, yeah?
Yeah, man.
Mashallah, congratulations on your Islam, bro, man.
Thank you, my friend.
You know, the Muslim community really welcomes you, man.
Yeah, it's been pretty divided. I've had a whole bunch of support.
Yes.
Obviously, there's been some people who are not quite pleased about the idea. I think when you have a passionate subject and people that are truly engulfed in an idea, you're going to have some degree of polarization.
I think that maybe when you look in the online space, that might be your impression. But in reality, on the ground, I mean, that's definitely not the case. I would say the vast majority of people, 80, 90%, are completely happy about this. And it's just that the minority haven't.
I'm not quite sure the sample he's drawing from, but go on.
Very loud voice.
Well, that's exactly it. That's the whole problem with the internet as a whole, not just Islam, but the internet as a whole is about vocal minorities that look much larger than they are, right?
Yeah.
And I agree with you, and I'd like to hear that. But the reason I know what you're saying is true is because it's the same even in my case in other subjects. Online, I have all this some kind of hate or people trying to disagree with me, but when I walk through life, I have 30,000 interactions with people, and not a single one's ever been negative, ever.
Now again, back to sample. Jordan Peterson makes this comment again and again and again and again. Now, it might be that once you become an extremely recognizable figure, most people, especially if it's a guy like Andrew Tate, who, you know, quite clearly physically fit, he's a kickboxer, he's known for this, he's known for his demeanor. You got to be some kind of moron to come up to the dude in public just out of the cold and insult him. You just might get whacked. And so, you know, that whole idea about, you know, I'm controversial on the internet, but in real life, everybody's really nice. Just think about it a little bit more.
So it is crazy how the vocal minority is amplified on social media.
The main thing to note, though, is that Islam, it completely wipes away your sins. I mean,
it was amazing because at a minute 45, this thing got theological. And theological in a way that over the last few months, my conversations with Jacob and my conversations with others, this whole question about, well, to what degree can someone be redeemed? Well, in what redeemed? And of course, obviously in a religious perspective where you imagine and believe in a judging God and there will be a judgment day. And of course, Andrew Tate, if you look at some of his bios, I guess he had I forget who called him a pimp, because I guess he had a stable of OnlyFans women, and then he had these ideas about, you know, not really following the sort of mutuality that I talked about last week in 1 Corinthians 7. So all of these issues, but I was amazed with just how salient these issues are, theological, very much relevant to today. Jump back to the other piece.
On those fronts, it doesn't matter to them because it's like, okay, they're consuming our hedonistic products or whatever it is. It doesn't change their worldview. Whereas what you're saying is ideological now. You're challenging the status quo of the LW, of the liberal world order. You're challenging second-wave feministic notions. You are challenging some liberal notions. You are challenging ideas, commonplace ideas of tolerance. And George Orwell said it very well. He said that the more a society moves away from the truth, the more it hates people who speak it.
Absolutely, and you're right. And I think even the basic things I teach, because some people have said to me, Andrew, all you teach about is personal responsibility, motivation, working hard, getting up and doing the right thing. I said, that's the absolute, those are the things they're most afraid of. If you teach people to have standards for themselves and to be morally strong people and to know right from wrong, then they can't brainwash you. Yes. So that's what they're most afraid of. They're most afraid of young men waking up and going, no, I don't believe that. You have to believe it. No, I don't believe it. I don't want to. And I want to go do this. I want to go to the gym, be strong, or I want to believe X, or I want to be a moral person. They genuinely have a problem with baseline morality.
Yes. Yeah.
Understand? When some people recognize when I converted to Islam that there was a time I was an atheist. There was a time when I was atheistic. And the reason I am now so absolutely certain that God is real is because I've seen evil. I've seen shaitan. I've seen it. When you see enough evil, you realize that there must be an equal and opposite force. And there are people out there in the world today doing the
Equal and opposite? Or are we Zoroastrian now?
work of the devil, genuine demons who are trying to destroy the baseline morality that's inside of all of us. We're all born with some kind of morality, and they're trying to destroy it.
And that's exactly the Islamic understanding, that we believe that you're born with something called fitrah, which is the initial goodness. You're born with an innate belief, receptivity to believe in one God.
Yeah.
And then that is corrupted. In fact, there's a prophet, hadith of the prophet where he says, كُلُّ مَوْلُودٍ يُولَدُ عَلَى الْفِطْرَةِ. Every born child is born upon this initial goodness. فَأَبَوَاهُ يُهَوِّدَانِهِ أَوْ يُنَصِّرَانِهِ أَوْ يُمَجِّسَانِهِ.
Now, again, the fact that he is quoting these in its original language is not incidental to the religion, a point that I've made often. Now, it's fun to take someone like Mohammed Hijab and the newly minted Muslim disciple, Andrew Tate, and put him next to this conversation, Religion Without Belief, with Rupert Sheldrake, Paul Kingsnorth, and Philip Goff. Because this is a real candidate for a full-blown commentary video, because there's a lot in here. Now, of course, I've met Paul Kingsnorth. Paul Kingsnorth has converted to Orthodoxy. Rupert Sheldrake has, they all have interesting stories, and this is a great conversation. Now, this conversation is going to trigger some of you in some very interesting ways. But one of the interesting points that Sheldrake makes in comparison to Kingsnorth actually touches on this whole Andrew Tate Islam issue.
Yeah, so can I maybe respond to Paul's earlier point? So I suppose maybe we're starting to get a little bit of possible disagreement, maybe not, in terms of this idea of not being a non-literalist Christian or a Christian without belief. So I'd like maybe I can say
now notice this is exactly what Andrew Tate is rebelling against when he says, I was raised a Christian. He was raised in, well, as Rupert Sheldrake's going to address him in, it's sort of in this inclusive, established church. Now Goff is going to sort of push back against this. Paul has kind of told his story. Rupert Sheldrake's talk. This is, 40 minutes into an hour and 15-minute conversation.
Two things in response to that. So firstly, yeah, I mean, coming back to Marcus Borg, who was a big influence on me coming to this non-literalist conception of Christianity. So he was certainly not someone without a sense of the divine. He believed in this greater reality at the core of things that he thought we had direct experience to. He thought its nature could not be put into words, but we could know it in experience, and that was the heart of his faith. And he thought...
Now, because the people have not stopped watching the video I made with Aubrey Marcus, commenting on Aubrey Marcus and Jonathan Peugeot, that video and that conversation continues to be on my mind, and that's very much germane here. So you sort of have a vague, omnipresent religiosity. Now, that in many ways is sort of the religion of the cathedral or the religion of the Blue Church. And of course, Andrew Tate comes into that and says, no, I want hard lines. I want bright lines. I want, this understanding.
Through the Christian story that involves this incredible inversion of worldly values, that leads to a deep understanding of the true nature of the sacred, the divine. Even though he didn't necessarily literally believe that Jesus was uniquely divine in a way that no other human being was, or that Jesus...
Now there you can find a connection here between this sort of non-Augustinian inborn goodness that Mohammed Hijab was just talking about as comparison to, let's say, more of an Augustinian approach to human nature. You can find a similarity sort of between Philip Goff and Mohammed Hijab here, even though in many ways they're going to be very much different.
Is left an empty tomb. He still thought this is not just a story. It reveals the truth of the divine. So it's one question whether both Ruben and Paul are right that, you know, without any sense of the divine, you know, it's all going to fall apart. But is the more nuanced question whether with that, not literalist, but in a way, believing that Christianity is in a sense true and a true reflection of the divine, whether Jesus reveals God to us.
Now it's very interesting because both with Andrew Tate and with Paul Kingsnorth's treatment about his conversion story, Paul Kingsnorth talks about the fact that he went into Buddhism, but he eventually left Buddhism because he wanted a God. And when you listen to Andrew Tate talk about this, again, he'll go back to this whole point about is there not a God? And again, when you're talking about a God in that sense, it's very much God number two-ness. It's a creator God, it's an agentic God, it's a willing God, it's a God of action. So both Paul Kingsnorth and Andrew Tate will have that in common. That sort of fits into the whole puzzle of, well, I'm going to begin to take religion seriously because now I believe there is a God. And again, what they mean by that is not sort of a God number one-ish, pantheistic, all out there, and we're going to talk in vague terms about the divine, not terribly agentic, not choosing, not judging, not exalting, you know, the God of the Song of Mary, the God who exalts some and tears down others, but just kind of a God that's just always there and always available. And if at some point you say, you know, I used to eat yogurt, and for a while I was listening to dance music, and I think now I'll get into divinity. That'll be fun too. You know, very different approach.
Whether that could play the same role. So that's one thing. I mean, the other thing I wanted to say, though, I mean, I guess that another question is, look, what do, and maybe there isn't disagreement here, but what do we say to people who turn up to our church and say, like myself, and say either I just don't know either way, or say, look, I just don't think these central claims are true, but I want to be part of the community. I love the practice. I love the traditions. I want to be part of it. What do we say to those people? And I can't really...
And it's very different from Andrew Tate coming into Islam saying, I want a gang. I'm looking for an army. You know, part of what's going on missiologically right now is sort of this choice between, let's say, high slope and low slope, between the steep hill that you should, a la Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson, that you should get up in the morning and you should pull that cross up the hill and you should exert yourself and draw clean lines and good boundaries and all of these. That's sort of the high slope. And, you know, part of the ambiguity that when I listen to Tom Holland and Douglas Murray is both of them want a religion that's strange. And that's sort of, you know, you can hear that behind Andrew Tate going to Islam. I want a religion that sets me out from the crowd. Ironically, also, I think for some, I was listening to, whose conversation was I listening to? I was listening to Cale Zeldin talk to Rod Dreher, and Cale Zeldin made the point that, you know, a lot of people transitioning, you know, they want to join team activist LGBTQ, and they don't want to just be some vanilla white teenage girl. They're now going to be queer, and they're going to have a rainbow flag, and they're going to be on the vanguard of justice. I mean, that motivation expresses itself in a whole lot of different ways, and it's sort of opposite sort of the, you know, kind of soft libertarian, you know, everything should be available, the force is out there, and, you know, you should avail yourself to it because it runs through all living things, and
we see a reason not to embrace them. You know, I have a very traditional Christian friend who said to me, you know, I'm very happy what you're doing. You're hearing the word of God, you know, you're...
So this is gentle slope Christianity. This is, we're not going to ask a lot of you. You know, and again, so part of what's going on culturally is religions that demand, they're getting converts. because step up and demand orthodoxy. You're going to be, we're going to have you going to this church and catechesis and doing stuff. And even after a year, we might not take you. A club that wouldn't accept me? How thrilling. But for others, it's, no, I just want to come in. I just want to be here. And I don't want any bright lines between members and not members and leaders and not leaders. And what's funny is that people say they want that until something happens. And then suddenly they want bright lines. Oh, well, the leader is just sort of a polyamorous, nice, warm person who's hitting on all the 20-somethings in the church. Is that a good thing? Oh no, that's the kind of reason we ran Governor Cuomo out of office. Oh, so how, when, where? Lines? No lines? How are you going to make this work?
And I actually gave a talk at my church last week. Actually, they have someone every month to talk about their journey of faith, and it was interesting. There were a couple of non-literalists who thought I was too much of a believer, actually.
And just the function of literalism. I was listening to another video where. No, it was actually the great courses on the Iliad, and this word literal. I mean, it's just like that that skit about the word literally, because all it means is really, really real or really, really true. I mean, the word is threadbare and just simply ought to be thrown out for another century or so.
And then a couple of more traditional evangelical Christians saying, asking me about, what do you think about prayer? And the minister who was leading this said, I kept saying, oh, I'm sorry, I'm a heretic. And he said, oh, I don't like the word heretic. And I really appreciated that. So
here you see between this guy and Andrew Tate, sort of the two poles of religious attractionism today. I want my religion raw and weird and right here in your face. And you can find versions of that in Christianity. You can find it in Islam. I'm sure you can find lots of those. And then it's like, no, I want a religion that I can kind of do it myself and make it my own and take my time and think about it. And
I mean, sometimes you get in, it seems to be pointless conversations about what is a Christian, who can call themselves a Christian. But I don't know, we can use words how we want. We could use Christian to mean, someone who likes sausages or something. The question is, what do we do with these people who, on honest intellectual grounds, either...
Father Eric likes sausages. He leaves Jewish Jacob's just chatting and says, I'm going to eat sausages. It's like...
It's important difference between lacking belief or disbelieving. We tend to just blur over that boundary by just saying, don't believe. But anyway, there's two different types of non-believers. There's ones who lack belief, who are not sure either way, and those who just disbelieve but still want to be involved. What do we say to those people? And I can't see a reason not to say, you're welcome.
Yeah, well, that's a good, there is an area of disagreement here, because I can see a very good reason not to say you're welcome. Because Christian doesn't mean anything we want it to mean. It doesn't mean I like sausages. It means I believe in the truth of Christ. And as I can't help looking back. I mean, look, let's say two things. Firstly, people have been arguing over the nature of Christ since Christ was alive, right? So that's, you can see that in the book of Acts. You can see people arguing about exactly what Jesus was. But there's also a church.
And in some ways, a lot of those people were in an environment a lot more strenuous than what we are today.
There's also a creed. And at the basic level, as Rupert says, to be a Christian is to believe in the Trinity, and it's to follow Christ and to believe that Christ is divine. Now, if you don't believe that, there's no reason you can't still be inspired by Christ or like Christianity or anything else. No one's going to stop you. But maybe this is the difference between the Orthodox and the Anglican Church. I mean, it wouldn't be possible to become a baptized Orthodox Christian if you didn't believe in the divinity of Christ. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have doubts sometimes. It doesn't mean people aren't going to have arguments about things or different theologies, or it's not like everyone has to be a robot and recite the Nicene Creed and forget that it was drawn up by a committee, because it was. But it seems to me this is where the faith comes in, right? Because the faith requires us to follow something that we can't literally prove to be true through philosophy or science. I can't prove that Christ rose from the dead, obviously. I can't prove that the resurrection was real or what it exactly did. And people have argued about the meaning of that as well. different Christian traditions have a different understanding of it. But if you don't have a kind of guardrail over your understanding of what Christianity is, then you haven't got Christianity. It's like any other word. If we decide that the word man or the word woman can mean anything we want them to, then we start getting into sticky waters, and that's a huge argument at the moment, right? Well, I mean, that's a huge social division going on. So what do words mean? Do they mean anything? They have to mean something. And different churches have different points of view on this. I would say there's a difference between people who come into a church and say, well, I've chosen to follow this path, even though I don't know whether I can do it, and I don't know how much of it is real. I don't really understand. I mean, a lot of people don't come into churches for theological reasons. They come to the church because they want to follow God, or there's any number of reasons people might come in. People don't usually start.
And now Andrew Tate probably became a Muslim not for theological reasons, and it'll be very interesting to see where this whole thing goes, if in fact it can be tracked, and you know that. You just really don't know. But he came into it probably because he's sick of all these namby-pamby, gentle slope, inclusivist people out there not meaning anything, and he wants an army, he wants a tribe, he wants black and white, and he wants no nonsense. And I don't know how that's going to work for your OnlyFans business, but we'll let you sort that out with your religious authorities.
Study theology before they come in anyway. But I think if somebody,
especially since a big part of insurgent Islamism has been, well, the perceived decadence of the West. On one hand, we've got, burqa-wearing women because no flesh can be seen. On the other hand, you've got, well, Western pornography.
But he says, well, look, I actually don't believe a word of this, but I like the songs and the cake afterwards, so can I be a Christian, please? I think the answer should be no, you can't, because otherwise, what's the meaning of it? It's just a sort of social club. I don't see there's no strength to it. There's no core to it. There's no, I just look back on the 2,000 years of people who.
And so here you have, coming out of Paul Kingsnorth, Christianity needs to be demanding. If it's not demanding, I'm not interested.
Who confessed Christ, many of whom were martyred and abused for doing it. And I think I can't stand here and say, well, maybe it was just all nonsense, really, but I sort of want to join in. It's like there has to be, like I say, there has to be a surrender, doesn't there? We have to surrender to something, even if we don't want.
Now, this is why on my convos, I always leave all of the images of people up there, because we can take in a lot more information than just our ears can take. And so if you're not watching this at 2 or 3x, you can keep your eye on Rupert Sheldrake, on his body language. You can keep your eye on Philip Goff. And the other guy is mostly just setting up and hosting the conversation.
Want to. And that might be surrendering to not knowing. Not exactly knowing. I bet I very much doubt every priest in the church is totally sure about everything all the time. They have plenty of doubts themselves, but are you going to walk the path or not? I think is probably the question as I see it. But Rupert might have a different idea.
Well, I think I do. I being an Anglican, the Church of England is the established church, which means by default, everyone in England is a member of it.
And I think that's exactly what Andrew Tate is fighting against.
They're entitled to be baptized, married, etc. in their parish church. And so it's an inclusive, not an exclusive church. Some churches are
just don't say the word Christian nationalism.
Exclusive, Plymouth Brethren, Roman Catholic, etc. You have to join, you're a member. And the Anglican thing's much more broad, and it's literally a broad church. And I think that a lot of people, for example, love going to choral evensong in cathedrals, which I think is one of our greatest cultural.
Okay, now this is gentle slope, and what's interesting about guys like Tom Holland and guys like Douglas Murray. I mean Charles Murray. Douglas Murray. Triangular triangular name dyslexia is, they both want demanding and strange religion, but they practice the gentle slope.
heritages and one of the most beautiful and inspiring things that happens in our land. I love going to choral evensong and cathedrals myself, and indeed I helped set up a website called choralevensong.org, where you can find a choral evensong near you any day of the week, and in fact go to many of them on streaming online. Now, a lot of people who go to choral
and online YouTube, of course, is the gentlest slope you can imagine. Just click.
evensong, and it's not a Holy Communion service. It doesn't raise the question of do you believe in the body and blood of Christ. It's an evening prayer service, and it's with quiet prayers for the evening and God's protection through the night, and beautiful singing and the singing of the Psalms. And some people who go to it are atheists, but they're inspired by the music. And I wouldn't say to any of them, you shouldn't be here. What I'd say is, you're very, very welcome. In fact, I try and encourage people to go to it, whatever their belief system, because who knows what will happen through going to choral evensong. People may be touched by those prayers, moved by the singing, come to a greater sense of God's reality and presence, and may become more and deeper Christians as a result. Whereas if they're told in the first place, you're not, what right have you got to be here, or anything like that, it's going to put them off, and it'll just mean that, there's be little way open for people from this godless secular world to find a path back to contact with the Christian tradition. I see this as a way of, I see the many steps on this journey.
Now, part of what is behind all of these conversations is what's the goal? And so, and what's the goal? What's the arena? And what is demanded of the agent? Contact with the Christian tradition. Is that what you want for people? I guess you could, have the priest bless the fire truck and have the firemen just sort of spray the crowd with a light dusting of holy water. There's contact with the Christian tradition. How are you going to manage this? What is the goal? Now, of course, for the high slope, strenuous, you want to what? What do you want to achieve? Where do you want it going? What do you want to see happen? Is it public? Is it communal? Is it political? Is it out in the world? Is it lower register, or is it upper register? Is it mental? Is it psychological? Is it fundamentally a psychological immaterial experience, and what's going on in the lower register doesn't matter?
I've certainly been through quite a lot myself. And the fully committed Christian point of view that you're describing, Paul, which, I'd share much of that view myself, is not the best way in which most people are going to find the Christian faith again. Not everyone's going to have a vision of Jesus, or
now again, steep slope, gentle slope.
Some of them it'll be a much more gradual process, and that's why I think it's very important that the Church of England is an inclusive church, and that's why I very much support that general approach. On our British Pilgrimage Trust guided pilgrimages, we have a slogan that you probably wouldn't like very much called BYOB, bring your own beliefs, because our point is this is about experience, not about belief. We don't want people to be put off by people who've had very little contact with the Christian tradition, know nothing about it, can't be expected to sign up to a belief system, but they can be expected to enjoy walking through the countryside, connecting with the natural world, going to an ancient holy place with an intention, praying there, lighting a candle, going to choral evensong, saying a prayer, connecting with this heritage and tradition. For many people, that's very, very important. And it goes before a change in their beliefs, not following after a change in their beliefs.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, actually. So I think I'm talking about a different thing. Maybe I was being unclear. Yeah, that's absolutely the case. And that's what I was doing for 20 years. And, it would be the same in the church that I go to. People come to that church, and I've taken people to that church who have all sorts of different beliefs or none. And that's how I first went there. So I'm not suggesting for a minute that people shouldn't go to the church and experience it or go on a pilgrimage. Of course they should, absolutely. Otherwise,
here's in some ways where the demanding strangeness and the gentle slope meet each other. Because in some ways, Paul Kingsnorth has parts of both in him.
It just becomes a kind of fanatical sect. Yeah, absolutely. What I was talking about was not so much the experience of, well, not so much that experience, and I'm totally with you there. It was probably the second part of what you're talking about there. Once you, if you
now, this might seem small, but Andrew Tate would never sip from a glass the way that Philip Goff just did.
It was not so much that experience, and I'm totally with you there. It was probably the second part of what you're talking about there. Once you, if you decide to make a
I'm ADHD and easily distracted by silly things. I got it.
Commitment to, say, being a Christian. If you decide to do that, which you might not, you might want to go to church for 20 years and not make that commitment, which is fine. No one's going to stop you coming to experience a liturgy or something. But if you decide to say you're a Christian, I think at that point, there are definitions that come into play. That was the point I was trying to make, rather than because as I say on that, I agree with you and Philip about that in terms of the experiential nature of this. People get drawn into this very slowly. I think this is what was happening to me for a quarter of a century. I just didn't realize it. So absolutely, if you walk into a church and people aren't welcoming and they want to quiz you on your theology, then you're going to be off. So that's that. I think we're probably talking about different things maybe.
Another thing it might be good to raise is that, I mean, there is controversy about, and philosophical debate about, the meaning of the word faith and whether the contemporary word belief adequately captures that. So, I mean, Karen Armstrong has argued that
just to feel the bracing differences here.
And then his father and mother, or his parents, they socialize him into Christianity, Judaism, Magiism. So the idea is that everyone is born with this initial goodness and this initial will or want to believe in God, one God. And then, as you mentioned, I mean, it's what you're mentioning here is profound, because you're mentioning a central doctrine in Islam.
But it's and this is why perhaps I found God the way I did, because I understood all these things first, and then I saw the Quran, and it confirmed so many things for me. Like even the conversations I've been having so far, so many things have been confirmed, and it's amazing the knowledge that's inside of it, which is so applicable today. For an old book, right? It's supposed to be old, but it seems so timeless. But it's truly amazing. But you're totally right. And
again, the God he's looking for is a God who draws lines, and a God who excludes, and a God who will put you on your butt if you're not doing the right thing, and rather than a God who is just kind of always there and, are you going to pay any attention to me now? And pastors who are quivering masses of availability. So it's fascinating what's happening in the culture now between sort of the gentle slope religion and the high slope division, the high slope religion, where it's demanding, it's got to be weird, it's got to be strange. But then you see again, and I really saw this in the UK in some ways. I think that's stronger in the UK than it is in the US, where both of these demands are sort of right there. That, hey, it better be gentle slope, or there should be no place for that in my country. But then it better be strange and odd, or there's no reason for it to exist. So anyway, these videos just sort of brought out that dynamic in a very vivid way. So leave a comment. Let me know what you think.